Hi there, I am Blackbright, just checking in. I wanted to do a review of the Small Axe film. I'd kind of done a pseudo review on my Dark Shades Counselling channel, but I wanted to go a bit more in depth. Not that I want to make this a bit longer, but I wanted to see what could be going on in the mind of a black man, i.e., Steve McQueen, who would produce a documentary that didn't represent us very well. What I learned was Steve McQueen, he's born in 1969, so he can't really know that much about the Lovers Rock era. He would have kind of lived through it vicariously, probably through his parents. Also, he's half Trinidadian and half Grenadian, and he's also married to a white woman. The reason why all of these things matter is that he's produced a documentary about Lovers Rock, and he doesn't have a clue about it. Now, somebody's obviously told him about some of the elements, so that when we saw the beginning of the documentary, it seemed to resonate with a lot of us. And everybody was going around telling people to, watch it, turn it on BBC One. And when we saw the Lovers Rock and we saw the dancing and we saw the guys approaching the women and the way the women were responding to the men, even though they were a bit short tempered, you kind of let them get away with it because it seemed a bit funny at the beginning. It seemed quite amusing and nostalgic. And us not having that, because of the lockdown, we haven't got that Lovers Rock. We can't enjoy those Lovers Rock moments at the moment. So we were all kind of looking forward for that film to revive and to kind of resonate with us and give us fond memories. What happened, however, was that it seems that, as usual, I don't mind who plays the part. Grenadans, Trinidadians, but don't pretend you're a Jamaican. That's what gets my back up. That's what gets a lot of people's back up because it's not authentic. Now, a lot of people were complaining about the accents over and above anything else, and there's nothing more irritating than you find people to play parts of a Jamaican when, number one, the Jamaicans weren't even needed because Lovers Rock is a black British culture. And number two, why do they have to be Jamaican? And to make it worse, they make them Jamaican and they have this stereotype of them smoking ganja and doing all kinds of extreme behavior, being rough, being aggressive. That is not how all Jamaicans are. And it just seemed as though the film was there to fulfill the negative stereotype. What is the negative stereotype? Black women are aggressive. Black men are violent. Black men are criminals. We saw the guy breaking into that telephone booth because in the olden days, the money used to be in the booth. And then we saw the drugs and the alcohol and the extraneous behavior. And you just kind of looked at it and you're like, that's not us. That doesn't represent us. So while it might look like we're being crab in a barrel, a black man make a film and we can't just big up the man and we can't make him, we can't applaud him for what he's done. 12 Years a Slave was absolutely fine. Other films he's done were fine. Even Mangrove, the first part of The Small Axe, was fine. But when you take Lovers Rock, to many of us, that is all we have. That is our memory. And we relive that memory all the time. We can't relive it because of COVID. So we were hoping to relive that memory through the film. The first part of the film seemed to cover Lovers Rock. I mean, you did get a feel that that is what it was like. They used to take the room, all the furniture out of the room. We'd hold the party in people's houses and people would pay maybe £1 or something or 50p, whatever it was. And you would go in and you would dance. Normally, it would be much fuller than that. But the thing is with that is that number one, the women weren't Lovers Rock women. When I say they weren't Lovers Rock women, The Lovers Rock era, we had a dignity, we had a sense of class. We didn't just show up in some cheap blouse and some long skirt. That is not what we did. Our skirts were either Marks and Spencer's with the pleats, or they were Burberry. Our shoes, Russell and Bromley, Shelley, Revels, Dulces. That's where we got our shoes. And we'd be wearing Chanel perfume. And we'd have our gold. We'd have a lot of gold rings, and our hair would be done, and we would look sharp. And the men, Aramis, that's what they'd be wearing. Paco Rabanne. They'd be wearing their Crombies. They'd be wearing their Trilbies. They'd be wearing their Beavers. They would be wearing their tonic suits. They'd be wearing their crocodile shoes and their crocodile belts. And they'd be having their handkerchiefs. And they'd have their gold, their sovereigns and their gold as well. We were the bee's knees. We didn't look cheap. And dare I say it, that is how those girls looked. Their little cheap Macs. There's no way. Our Macs were Burberry. When you looked on the inside, they might have been cream on the outside, but we wore brand names. We wore the best. We used to save. And I don't even know how I used to save. I used to buy Russell and Bromley shoes all the time. They were about 150 quid at the time. They were expensive. But that's how we used to dress. And then we'd buy the cigarettes, and we wouldn't even, half of us wouldn't even smoke them. You know, we just have it for the style, and we'd buy St. Moritz, which was a turquoise blue packet, and we'd have Dunhill, which was a burgundy packet, and they had gold little trimmings to make it look expensive. And that's how we were, and we'd have our little bag, and we were ladies. And yes, some of us might have been a bit feisty, but there's no way we would have talked to the men like that. No way. We might and do a little cheeky little thing. Who are you talking to? And you know, they kind of know that you're feisty, but it's a kind of a play thing. But those women in that film, they seem to be very, very aggressive. And that's what I didn't like. I didn't like the fact that they were disrespecting men. I mean, a couple of them, they needed to push off. But the way that they spoke to every black man that they come across, it was as though they were really condescending and demeaning. And what kind of message is that sending? That is not the message of Lovers Rock. Lovers Rock was, like I said in my previous video, it was where strangers became lovers and they rocked on the dance floor, intimately rocking, intimately entwined. Back, what they used to say, rub and go down and wine and come in. It was a gyratory system. You had to be agile. And the thing is that it was a loving environment. It wasn't that hostility. It wasn't that aggressive. When people went to those dances, they were looking for their husbands. They were looking for their partners. It wasn't a place where you shoot up and you behave like that. So when I was thinking about Steve McQueen producing that, I don't think he had the knowledge. And whoever he asked, I mean, 1969, that's too old. I mean, that's too young to be able to kind of replicate a Lovers Rock era. I mean, you might say he's too young to do 12 Years a Slave. But with that, you have so much documentary, so much books, so much history you can actually create. It's there everywhere you look. Slavery is there everywhere you look. But Lovers Rock is quite unique. And it's unique to us for a reason. And the thing is that's why it was so, it felt derogatory and it felt demeaning. Seeing the woman sitting on a toilet and then taking the tissue and wiping herself. Why was that necessary? It was almost like Steve McQueen doesn't like black women, or he doesn't want to portray them in a positive light, or he has a certain perception of black women. That was what it was like, as being like that. And so she's looking out of the window. Why couldn't they place her anywhere else? for her to look out the window. And why would she even play that role? But you know, some people, they're just so eager for the money. They don't even say, well, I don't want to be filmed sitting on a toilet. You know, I don't want to be viewed like that. And then the two lesbians, I mean, where did that come in? And for it to be so open, there's no way that would, I know they were in a room, but there's no way it would have been that open for us. I mean, to be honest, as far as I was concerned, gay and lesbian was a new phenomenon. You know, maybe in the 90s, and I mean, it probably was going a long time ago, but it was very, very undercover. So we wouldn't have even been aware of it, even if we had those feelings ourselves. So to throw that in there, that was totally off the wall. That should not have been in there. So it was almost like whoever was helping him produce the film said, look, we've got to throw some lesbianism in there. We've got to show some violence in there. Throw the black guy being a criminal. Throw the drugs. You know, all those black people, they all smoke drugs. Show them drunk and disorderly, and show them abusing the women and the men abusing the women and the women abusing the men, and then we're going to fulfill that narrative. That was what it was like. It was like they'd just contrived this documentary to send a message. We do not want to be represented like that. So you've made very good films. Steve McQueen has made very good films. But this film did not represent us. The second part wasn't even Lovers Rock. It was like some dub business. And the men all over the floor and shaking their head like they're on coke, like they're totally zoned out. There's no way that would have happened. Or maybe it did happen in certain parts of the world. I wouldn't know. You know, I'm a Northwest London girl. But it just didn't do us any justice. And it's a shame because you have an opportunity to represent black people in a positive way. Okay, with the 12 years a slave, that is our history. And yeah, that's how you can show us. You can show us as slaves and whatever. But now you have an opportunity to show us, depict us honestly, in a true and authentic way, where we were the queens. That's when we were queens. We were affluent to a degree. I don't know. We worked hard. We had 2 or 3 jobs. We bought the best. And when we stepped out, you know, yes, half of those men couldn't look palmy. That was how it was. But even then, it would just be like, you know what I mean? They'd have to have a certain amount of charm. And the one guy that, the guy that had the part in, at least he was polite, and to be honest, I think he was how the majority of our black British men were. If a Jamaican did come in there, and there were many, or there were some, there wasn't even all that many to begin with in the Lovers Rock scene. But even if they did, they were still quite charming. They weren't, you know, sly and sinister like that. They made out like those men were so sinister looking. And there's no way we would have gone to a Lovers Rock dance if that's the way the men looked. Our men didn't look like that. Our men were sharp. And like I said, you could cut your finger on the seam in their trousers. Shirts pressed sharp. They even wore ties, some of them. And the skiffle haircut, sharp. And you know, sometimes some of them would have a parting, but it wouldn't be like that guy's parting. I mean, those hairstyles, I don't even know. I think they got the eras mixed up. I really think they got the eras. It's like they just bunged in different eras or different genres. I don't know what they did with that, but it was such a shame. It was so disappointing because I was so enthusiastic. I called all my mates, and then one by one, we all had to say, oh, I'm not going to watch it. It's not like how we remembered it. And it kind of tainted our memory. And we didn't want it to taint our memory. We wanted it to be a positive experience, and it wasn't. I don't think I'm going to say much more. Yeah, I think that's all. I just think as a learning, Get people if you need to represent Jamaicans, get Jamaicans to play the part, or even British people with Jamaican parents. They'll still put on the Jamaican accent better than somebody from the other islands who try to speak Jamaican. It really lowers the tone of the film, and it makes people switch off because you can feel the lack of authenticity. And what we're looking for is authenticity. It needs to feel real. It needs to be believed. So it's not like we're just criticizing just because it's a black director. No, because a lot of people have praised him for his previous attempts. But this, it was totally out of his league because people do not understand Lovers Rock. You have to be in it. They normally say to win it, but you have to be in it to understand Lovers Rock. It's very, very unique. It's very special, and it cannot be replicated unless it's the people who were actually in that era. And that's all for now. Bye-bye.